Hello there, and welcome to Weird Music on the Glumberger channel. This is, of course, the show where we, no doubt take little dives into weird and unusual albums, We look at all sorts of different things here, or at least I hope so, some weird, some unusual, some completely bonkers, anything else in between as well, and, today we're going to be looking at a very strange and unusual album, We have touched upon albums like this before, and we're definitely going to be touching upon them in later episodes, but, this is... because there's so many I want to dive into. I just find albums like this fascinating. I don't know why. But, this one feels like a really big head scratcher. Like more so than anything else that we've actually covered within this genre, I feel. So of course we're looking at the 1982 album from Phill Niblock, titled Nothing to Look At, Just a Record. Okie dokie. Let's first ask ourselves, who is Phill Niblock? Well, Phill Niblock is an American composer, filmmaker and videographer who founded Experimental Intermedia, a foundation for avant-garde music based in New York. And across his entire career, Niblock has immersed himself in the wonderful world of experimentation, letting his creative muse take him to the most curious and unusual places in the world of media. And within his music career, Niblock has released countless albums, mostly delving deep into the world of experimental drones. And his style is, it's a rather unusual one. He has a method to his experimentation. You'll usually see him taking, single absolute tones of various instruments, editing them to take out the breathing and stuff, the attack and the decay out. And then he layers these single tones on top of each other to create these colossal walls of sound. It's some of the most monumental drone you could ever conceive, and it's one that every time it completely hypnotizes you into this really peculiar state of mind that's truly unlike conventional albums, I'd argue. So yeah, in today's episode we're going to be looking at his debut album, as it was, Nothing to Look Here, Just a Record. And this album, saw Niblock deploying his trademark style of layered singular tones of instruments, which in this case features the trombone as the sound source. And so on the record we're given two compositions, a trombone piece on the A side, and on the B side we have a third trombone. And I have to say, I like the humour in the titles there. I don't know why, but it makes me chuckle a bit. But, regardless, these two compositions, it sees Niblock taking the source sounds from the trombone players. For side one, you had a James Fulkerson performing the bass trombone, and on side two, you had a John English performing regular trombone. And so what you're given are these two 20-minute compositions that just bombard you with these sustained layered tones, and it becomes really difficult to actually find anything tangible to attach yourself to as the compositions just continue to push onwards and onwards. There's no pauses, there's no respite, there's just drones. And for fans of drones, it's a truly phenomenal experience to behold. It's one that, like so many of Niblock's works, it just needs to be played loudly, I feel. You just need to play it loud and just let it pour itself on top of you, let those textures just, build and build and build, push you further and deeper into that murky miasma of tones and drones. There's something weirdly fun about the experience. It's very peculiar though. And so, yeah, it's very difficult to go through these track by track, but, we'll try our best for a little bit anyway, On track one, you've got a trombone piece. The tones and layer themselves, they're really dark and murky, especially with it being the bass trombone. Creates this very peculiar and foreboding experience that just baffles you with these really low-end bassy layers. And then when you get to the second track, a third trombone, there's something slightly more lifting about the particular tone of the drones themselves, and yet it still manages to overload and bombard you as it continues to push onwards and onwards. It's so weird, but after the battering and ominous experience of the first track, a third trombone feels weirdly lighter and more accessible, despite being a completely inaccessible composition in the first place, of course. But yeah, it's all weird and phenomenal though. I find myself just really enjoying the experience of getting lost within those really dark, murky layers, And it reminds me of what I actually enjoy about brass instruments, which is simply how they sound, not in the Nymperigan way, but like when they're actually played nicely. You just get these really lovely textures from them, and I enjoy actually hearing as part of this long-form drone experience. Like it's baffling, but it's really lovely at the same time. So yeah, nothing to look at, just a record. Really peculiar and unusual album. It pulls you into this very textured world though, and the appeal of music like this truly isn't for everyone. I honestly understand it, like why this is really inaccessible, but I just find it interesting and exciting as well. Like I just really enjoy listening to this stuff. But I feel as though the best person to explain the appeal of Phill Niblock's music is Phill Niblock himself, who in a 2014 interview with Mocad described it all as...
I think something like 20 to 25 minutes is the time that it takes to sort of get into and to lose yourself in the piece. It's partly losing yourself in time because there's no time markers in the music. What happens in the microtones really becomes much more prominent when it's loud. If you play this music very soft, you hear the instrument. If you play it very loud, you begin to really hear the microtones. There's one piece, the piece which was that first piece where I tuned a musician. When you turn it up, it's where it becomes really loud, like 120 dB. You hear all those overtones, and the cello disappears.
And so yeah, I feel like this actually, it really sums up the appeal of music like this. It's music that's minimalist, it's atonal, microtonal, very experimental as well and stuff, obviously. But listening to it really loudly, though, it reveals so much about the instrument that you would never get from simply hearing it. It's truly fascinating, and it's also something Yoshi Wada was interested in when we discussed them in episode 17. Like the effect of listening to these instruments really loudly. And so, on top of these the words from Niblock himself, I did some further background information so I'd have a little bit more to talk about in this episode. Because albums like these are process albums. It's very interesting to talk about the artists, their intent and stuff like that as well. But yeah, researching into Phill Niblock, I found a particular quote it provided information into his art form that adds a further level of context and understanding into what he does as a composer. The following is another quote from Niblock himself, clearly the best person to explain his baffling world, and this was featured in the liner notes for the 2003 album Touch Food, released on Touch. The quote being, "In the mid-1960s, I was riding a two-stroke Yamaha motorcycle up a long mountain slope in the Carolinas, stuck behind a diesel-engine truck. Both of our throttles were very open, overcoming the force of gravity. Soon, the revolutions of our respective engines came to a nearly harmonic coincidence, but not quite. The strong physical presence of the beats resulted for the two engines running at slightly different frequencies put me in such a trance that I nearly rode off the side of the mountain." Man, that's an amusing little story, I have to say, but what I love about it though is that something completely coincidental and unexpected, this occurrence seemed to inspire something really deep inside of Phill Niblock, pushing towards this journey of exploring frequency and tones. And on the Wikipedia as well, it describes this very incident as an epiphany that he had of what he experienced, and I think that's a very apt way of describing it all. To be honest with you, it even sums up the indescribable feeling I get when listening to drone albums as well. The actual quote from Niblock, being put into that trance-like state where everything is moving, and yet it's also kind of perfectly still at the same time, and it provides so much context for us in terms of why Niblock pursued a career in exploring the weird and abstract world of drones. There's something cool about that. I feel like really cool about it. So there's another amusing little story, one that actually regards another band we're already covering on this channel in other episodes, And so when browsing the SWANS subreddit, I came across, this iceberg meme that of course goes all over the place, with more and more obscure facts regarding the band. But one that really interested me was this one all the way at the bottom, titled Phill Niblock Tour Bus Torture. And after a little digging, I was able to find out a little bit more about this. So this entry on the iceberg originates from a passage found in the 2018 book SWANS, Sacrifice and Transcendence, The Oral History, which goes into the really long history of the band SWANS. But in particular though, there is an entry discussing the band's touring, and in particular, experiences on the tour bus with Michael Gira. And the excerpt is as follows. Our bus driver in Europe got so mad at Mike that the bus company wouldn't let Mike travel on the bus, so he and Jarbo had to go by rail. The driver couldn't deal with him. It was maybe a good thing. It gave the band some time to chill out. If Mike was on the bus, then all we would be listening to was The Young Person's Guide to Phill Niblock. That was the only record he would allow. It's atonal drone music. He would space out and listen to that record forever. It's where his head was at. But we'd all just done a show and we couldn't take it. So it was good he got off the bus because that record was killing us. I find it very amusing. I find it funny as well. There's a bit of schadenfreude about it. Those poor people having to put up with it. But yeah, the album The Young Person's Guide to Phill Niblock is a 2-disc compilation album comprising of most of Niblock's earlier recordings, including a trombone piece and a third trombone. And there's something really amusing and funny about the band being subjected to the monotonous drones featured on this album, I can just imagine their experience of being on that bus, tired and knackered after doing a gig, and then you just get blasted with these atonal drones. It's a phenomenal story that I really wanted to share in this episode because there's something weirdly funny about it, bless them. And of course with that though, I think we're going to be coming to the end of today's episode of Weird Music, This is one of the most peculiar and unusual experimental drone records, and it's one that seems to have, it's got its own level of infamy in the world of music, But regardless though, I think there's something delightful about the way Phill Niblock explores his own creative notions, who, through a sheer coincidental, almost near-death experience, started to delve deep into the world of frequencies, tones and drones. And it can be a kind of overwhelming experience to behold, but there's something truly wonderful about the loud drones we experience when listening to Phill Niblock's music, especially when it's really loud and stuff. Just listen to it at a loud volume and just let it overtake you entirely. It's so cool. But yeah, with that though, I would love to thank you for watching today's episode of Weird Music. This is another really weird one of course, but I really like drone albums. There's going to be a lot more of these to discuss, I think. But yeah, I'd like to thank you for watching today. If you have any suggestions for other weird albums out there, then please feel free to check them in the comments. I've been already getting some really interesting suggestions that I'm hopefully going to get into once I write the scripts for them. So yeah, keep an eye out for some of them. People have suggested some very interesting stuff. For now though, I wish you all the best. I hope you take care, all the best, and bye bye for now. Bye bye.